because they're being phased out. There is a new generation of chemicals being developed right now that are going to be used. California's green chemistry process, as your analysis points out, probably makes this bill irrelevant because of these new chemicals that will come under the green chemistry process. So there's just no need to do this bill. You know what, Mr. Chairman? I wrote 10 notes here.
If you'd like to summarize, you may.
And I'd like to, if I could somehow summarize those notes, I'm not sure I could. As my mother would say, Joe, you didn't write it very well. A couple of things, I guess, and then there are two witnesses here, one for technical expertise and then one burn physician who I think can speak to the danger of burn victims. One point was made that there is no statistical correlation between open flame fires and deaths or injuries. That's just not true. And in the packet that I forwarded to you all, there's a specific statistical information and analysis that talks and shows that, in fact, open flames are the third largest cause of residential fires in the United States. More importantly, even though they are secondary to cooking fires and cigarette fires, they are the largest cause of death and injury in fires in the United States. By lowering this standard, you will in fact be playing right into the hands of where injuries and deaths occur. Because the witnesses earlier were correct. We in California did adopt the fire safe cigarette law. Because of that, fire deaths and injuries due to cigarette smoking and smoldering are going down. Why, at a time when they're going down, would you say that we need to have a standard that addresses those? The standard should be the highest standard, flammability standard, where a third of the injuries and deaths occur. Mr. Chairman, I do have Dr. Gordon Nelson from the Florida Institute of Technology, who is a chemist, who can talk about, in a detailed ways, about risk assessments and chemicals. Don't know that's necessary to do that, but any questions we're happy to take.
Thank you. Do you have any brief testimony, sir?
Yes, sir. Gordon Nelson, native Californian from Palo Alto. And I've been working on plastics and fire retardants for the last 35 years. And it was said earlier that somehow, well, there's no other like requirement. Well, I started my career in television. And when the U.S. Consumer Product Safety Commission declared TVs as made in the United States of unreasonable risk, 200 deaths a year. What was done at that time was to put flame retardants into the casing of televisions. What happened? The deaths and injuries related to TVs in the United States went to near zero. Here in the state of California, in 1990, the U.S. Consumer Product Safety Commission found 890 deaths from upholstered furniture around the United States. If one said, well, what's the portion that ought to be in California, would be 110. But in 1990, how many were there in California? 20. And so that California's experience is unique in America, not unique in the world. Previous speaker misspoke. There's the United Kingdom, and they actually have an even tougher standard. The UK folks say that they will not allow non-flame retardant polyurethane in residences. Why? Because it's so flammable. So I have been involved in fire safety for 35 years. A third of fires dealing with upholstered furniture, in fact, have absolutely nothing to do with cigarettes. And it's those fires, flaming fires, that can be very hot very quickly. Fire is toxic. I did the largest toxicity study, real fire exposure in the U.S., some 2,500 cases, examining it. Fire is toxic. A big fire is very toxic. What flame retardants are all about is to have, one, if you can, no fire. That's the first thing. Second is flame retardants are there to make fires smaller. a small fire is much less toxic, and to cause fires to take a longer time to develop, which means there's time for evacuation. So flame retardants are important to do the job to save lives. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Dr. David Heimbach, professor of surgery at the University of Washington, and for 35 years the director of the University of Washington's Burn Center. We take care of all of the severe burns in the states of Alaska, Idaho, Montana, and Washington. I have been the president of the American Burn Association and the president of the International Society for Burn Injuries, the international largest burn physician group, and have actually gotten a Compassion Award from the Dalai Lama last year. You people and everybody in this room probably aren't going to get burned up with a cigarette in bed. You probably have working smoke detectors. You probably have the finest materials in your house. The people I take care of, the vast majority of the people I take care of are the impoverished people of those states, including a very large number of native Alaskans. They don't have those things. I think it behooves us to provide an environment for them that's as safe as possible for their burns. They talk about, oh, these are toxic chemicals. Well, pure pine smoke with nothing added to it contains 280 known toxic chemicals. Cotton smoke the same. Most fires are plastic. They contain 3 times as many known named toxic substances. The stuff that we're talking about here is just one more of those. And so the likelihood you're getting cancer from that specifically rather than 300 other chemicals is pretty small. I will give you just one tiny example. I took care of a 7-week-old baby from Alaska last year. The 7-week-old baby was in a crib laying on a fire retardant mattress on a non-fire retardant pillow. Mom put a candle in the crib. Candle fell over. The baby sustained a 50% burn. The entire upper half of her body was burned. Now, this is a tiny little person, no bigger than my Italian Greyhound at home. Half of her body was severely burned. She ultimately died after about 3 weeks of pain and misery in the hospital. And I bring this up also to mention that this is a statewide problem, because most of these people are covered by Medicare or Medicaid insurance. And her hospital bill was nearly $1 million. So for my perspective, I think that the safer we can make products for particularly those people who are most at risk, who don't have the same resources that all of us rich people have, is very much to our advantage. And I would hate to see the California standards get mired in going downhill. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Any other testimony in opposition? Members, any comments? Mr. Emerson.
Yeah, question.
Mr. Emerson and Mr.
Mr. Nichols? Nelson, thank you. I had a question about, it talked about furniture that's manufactured in California is not being sold outside of California. Do you have any thoughts about that or any knowledge about that, or are we in an arena that's foreign to you?
I would say not foreign, but it's outside of my my real expertise.
Could you address then the question about the example was IKEA, the Swedish store that supports this supports this legislation. Can you tell me how they can sell furniture in California if they don't meet California standards?
They wouldn't.
So
They have to meet California standards. They have to label the California standards. And what's interesting about IKEA, they sell furniture in the UK, which meets even a tougher standard.
So do you suspect that they manufacture different furniture for different locations? Or do they use all one standard? Or do you know?
I really don't know what IKEA does and how they work with their suppliers, so forth.
Mr. Vargas?
Excuse me, could I respond to Dr. Emerson?
Yes.
I think your question is a good one, but I don't know that Mr. Nelson's the guy you should be asking. I have a letter from IKEA, a retailer. And IKEA, I'm reading in their letter of support of our bill, dated March 29th. IKEA says, our policy is to try to minimize usage of flame retardants. Addition of flame retardants will almost inevitably result in some negative environmental impact at some stage of life cycle of the product. Because of California's TB 117, we have a special range of upholstered furniture that contain flame retardants for sale in North America. We would find it very hard to market this range in a country such as Germany, where the market expectations on absence of hazard chemicals are more stringent. The advantages of minimizing or avoiding additions of flame retardants to products may also include savings in cost for the consumer and avoiding a decrease in the lifespan of the product due to an adverse impact on mechanical properties. So that's what a retailer, a large retailer, has said about these chemicals and about TB 117.
Mr. Vargas?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Doctor, may I ask you a question? Thank you. Yeah, my question is, do you know the standards in cars? I mean, are there fire retardant standards in cars inside of the upholstery of a car?
I believe there are now. I don't know specifically what they are, but I know that there are a couple of bills around the United States that are even suggesting that they take the fire retardants out of school buses. And of all the places you don't want to catch on fire is a school bus full of crowded little children. So at the moment there are standards which some states are voting to remove them.
Okay. Does anyone else?
The standard for automobiles is MVSS 302, which is actually a horizontal burn test, not particularly severe, but does provide at least some claiming fire safety for automobiles.
The reason I was going to say, are you also familiar, Doctor, with Rancho Los Amigos Long-Term Rehabilitation Hospital in Downing?
Yes, I am. So, yes, I know of it. I don't have any patients there.
I was a chaplain there back in 1984, Catholic chaplain, and they had told me not to react negatively when I saw these two little girls because I was going to be quite struck by the way they looked. And, of course, I thought, well, I've seen a lot of people in difficult situations. I was not prepared for what I saw. These little girls had been playing in a car with their little brother, and unfortunately they started a fire in the car playing with matches. These little girls had had their faces burned off. Where the nose used to be, there were these two, they looked like prongs, like electrodes with little wires at the end. I don't know what that was for ultimately. I guess it allowed them to breathe better.
Right.
But they were, when they saw the clerical collar, of course, everyone told me that they were going to want to be playful and happy and to make sure that you had a smile on your face. It was very difficult for me to do that. In fact, the first time I saw them, after playing with them, I had to go cry somewhere. They looked so horrible, what had happened to them. And I guess that's the standard. I know that the senator asked us for a standard. We should have a standard. I mean, that's the standard that I have, those two little girls. That's the standard that sticks in my head. And I guess you as a doctor, I want to ask.
I have to deal with that every day of my life.
And your opinion then of us going to this dual standard?
I think it's terrible. I'm sorry, but that's how I feel. I just feel that if we can do anything to keep little children from getting burned, and once again, it's not your kids. It's going to be the little kids in the more economically deprived areas that get burned. It's not your kids.
Lastly, do you work for the chemical company?
No, sir. I'm a professor at the University of Washington.
Okay. I would like to ask the author, you did say that the people that were going to be testifying were people that work for the petroleum industry or the chemical industry. I think chemical industry. I don't want to put words in your mouth. But I did get a couple of letters here, and I know that I was looking at one from San Diego, the Burn Institute. Quite familiar with the Burn Institute. Jerry DeVee is he's the chairman of the board. He was a lawyer at Luce Forward Hamilton and Scripps when I was the lawyer there. Really a sincere guy. Unfortunately, he also got burned in a plane accident. And I also am familiar with the executive director there. They don't work for the chemical company. I see they're in opposition. So when you were saying that those were opposed work for the chemical industry, I don't think you meant everybody.
I didn't know everybody, so I didn't know these gentlemen. But I can tell you that this whole idea of citizens for fire safety is a national effort. It was dreamed up on Madison Avenue by a PR firm that we all know of, Burson Marsteller. These are the same people who brought us the National Smokers Alliance, which is a front group for the tobacco industry. So this is, rather than have the industry come forward and acknowledge who they are, they created Citizens for Fire Safety. And if you go to the Cal Access website, you'll see Burson Marsteller on behalf of the Bromine Science and Environmental Forum. That is the chemical industry. Also DBA, doing business as Californians for Fire Safety.
Okay, so you only meant that institution, not everybody else that was going to testify in opposition.
Right.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Ms. Corbett.
Since we're going down that road, is anyone on this? I know you are paid, Mr. But are either of the other witnesses in opposition paid for your time here? I'm not asking do you work for the chemical companies. I'm just asking were either one of you paid to testify for your time here in opposition to the bill?
They intermittently pay me for my trip down here.
Okay.
Citizens for Fire Safety.
Okay, thank you. And sir?
Citizens for Fire Safety are paying for my trip here, yes.
Okay, thank you very much. And your time here as well?
Yes.
Thank you.
Mr. Vargas, we never received that letter of opposition that you've just mentioned, nor is it in the analysis, so I don't know where it came from. It's not in the analysis, and we didn't receive it. Our office did not receive it as the author.
I thought I received it from the chair. Is that not in the package?
It was in the package.
If I may say, there should be two letters in opposition of the bill from the director of the Shrine Hospital here, and one from Dr. Warren Garner at UCSD in Los Angeles. So that
was passed out by the opposition.
Yeah, those are.
Mr. Chairman, I did need to apologize. Because of the Easter break, there were two letters that didn't get received till today, and so we weren't able to get them to the committee to put in the analysis.
Any other questions, comments? Mr. Weiland.
Just through the chair, if we could have access even after the vote, because depending on if it gets out, it'll be here on the floor, to the studies that were cited, to the letters. It's a complicated issue, and I'd certainly like to see them. Thank you.
It is complicated and certainly very emotional. I appreciate the comments on both sides. Senator Leno, let me ask you, though. There was reference to the chemical, I guess one of the principal chemicals being phased out. Sure. And a new generation of chemicals coming in. How do you respond to that? What's your comment on that?
I very much appreciate the question, Mr. Chair, because it is misinformation. We have not phased out, and nor are we requiring them be phased out. We have banned DECA, and keep in mind that the same opposition to this bill worked mightily hard to kill our legislative efforts to ban DECA. We have not banned Penta BDE, so that is still in use. And if you want to trust the same people who brought you all these other dangerous chemicals to say, it's okay now, we've made greener, safer chemicals, just trust us. None of them have been tested. So again, as I said at the very beginning, I don't want to get mired into all of this he said, she said. The point is, we are not lowering a fire standard. Let me repeat. We are not lowering a fire standard. And we're not banning any chemicals. The Consumer Product Safety Commission has already drafted a smolder standard. The federal government believes to be safe, equally safe to what we have. Our bill would require that the Bureau of Home Furnishings look at that standard and put into place an alternative standard. So again, manufacturers can have the option of equally safe fire standard regulations to comply with. And this is going to be market driven. If a mother or a father's looking for a sofa for the family living room, and they want these chemicals because they believe the arguments that these gentlemen have made, bless their hearts, they'll be able to go to a store and there'll be a label that says, This complies with TB 117. And we know, and you've heard from folks who are looking for alternatives for all the compelling reasons, which I will not now repeat. Let's allow them to have equally fire-safe furniture, deemed equally fire-safe by the same bureau that deemed TB 117 to be safe, that will be made in a 21st century way. That's all we're doing.
Was the phase out based on some negotiations, some discussions between the industry?
As I said, this is misinformation.
Well, hold on.
Yeah.
So you're saying there was no discussion? They just voluntarily did it, or there was discussion?
No, we here in California have banned certain chemicals. Not all these chemicals.
Okay.
And again,
But the ones we banned.
I respect
They
that
were
Mr. Lang says that his clients, the chemical industry, has now made greener and safer chemicals. We can all go home. I don't think we're all quite that naive, and we're not suggesting that they can't be used. We're just saying, let's look at, in a 21st century technology, a way to make an equally fire-safe standard that will not require old chemicals or new chemicals which have not yet been tested. Because Mr. Lang is not here to tell you his newer, greener chemicals have been tested by anybody and deemed to be 100% safe.
But my question is, was this phase out based on some negotiations, some discussions that have occurred, or did the industry just wake up one morning and say, we're going to just eliminate them?
Mr. Lang is the one who says they have been phased out, so I think he's the one who should answer your question, because I'm saying they've not been phased out. Maybe someone is phasing out somewhere, but again, it's not about specific chemicals. It's about a family and range of chemicals that we're not saying should be banned or not be used. But we know there are risks, and if there are new chemicals, there are unknown risks, because they've not been tested, along with the other tens of thousands of other chemicals in our environment which have never been tested. Let's have an alternative, equally safe fire standard.
Background on the phase out, how did that happen? Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, pretty straightforward. In the packet that I handed out to you all and cited in your committee analysis, this is a page directly from the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency website. It does, in fact, show and prove that, in fact, there is a phase-out that ends at the end of next year. That phase-out was entered into in discussions between the industry and the U.S. EPA later in the year 2009. What brought that discussion on was, in fact, not the results of the European Union risk assessment, which, in fact, found that there was no health risk, but the fact that the chemical is bioaccumulative. Because of that, the industry, looking forward to, and in fact looking to develop the next generation of fire retardants, agreed with the U.S. EPA that they would phase out, knowing that they were going to be developing newer, greener approaches to fire retardancy, approached the U.S. EPA and said, we are willing to enter into a voluntary phase out of the use of that chemical. And the U.S. EPA applauded it, said it's the right thing to do, and we're going to do it. And that ends next year. That chemical will no longer be used. Penta, the other chemical that Senator Leno referred to, has not been sold for many years. It's not used as a fire retardant anymore. There is a new generation. The key thing about that new generation is because of here in California we have the Green Chemistry Initiative, it will in fact be subject to the study that Senator Leno refers to as not having been done yet. It will be subject to green chemistry. If they find that there's an issue there, they'll suggest that there are alternatives to that chemical. But if we continue to ban chemicals that are developed before they're used, we won't have any chemicals in use. And you won't be able to create the new jobs that people want to create here in California by developing new products and new ways to approach things.
Mr. Chair, I have to correct it. He keeps saying we're banning chemicals. We are not. This bill does not ban chemicals, and just because Mr. Lang says so doesn't make it true. This is Dr. Wendell Brunner. He didn't get a chance to speak earlier. He is the Health Officers Association director, and he knows about this and can counter what Mr.
I'm sorry,
Lang
he knows about what?
If you could just, he can respond to your question about the phasing out.
The point about this, I represent the California Health Officers Association, and we're supporting this bill because we consider that the use of toxic halogenated flame retardants in furniture is one of the major toxic public health threats in California currently. The whole issue about these chemicals is that they're a class of chemicals. They're a large class of chemicals, many of which have been proven to be toxic in humans, but The chemicals that are used as fire retardants haven't been proven to be toxic in humans because they haven't been studied in humans. But they've shown to have health impacts including cancer, neurologic impairments, reproductive problems, and endocrine disruption in every animal species in which they're tested. They're not tested in humans like that. We can't do that. So it's reasonable to assume that these have the same kind of impacts in humans.
That was the basis for the phase-out?
Well, the problem with the phase-out is that it's like toxic whack-a-mole. These are a whole class of compounds. You ban one compound and you like move a bromine from one place to another place. It's a new compound. Hasn't been studied. So it's used. So that's one of the reasons we're not trying to ban specific chemicals. They appear faster than they can be banned or studied, but they're the same class of chemicals. In fact, one of the chemicals that's being used to phase in one of the banned chemicals is tris. Now, tris was removed from children's sleepwears in the early 1970s because of concerns about carcinogenicity, cancer-causing properties in children. But now that chemical, which was removed from children's sleepwear, is now put in our sofa furniture on which the kids now bounce up and down, leaks out into the ground, and so on.
Mr. Emerson?
Gordon Nelson, let me ask you this question. The newer chemicals that are being phased in, or at least being studied, are they bromide and chlorinated products, or are they something totally different?
Some are brominated. Others are very different. Well, I'm holding here a foam, and this actually has phosphorus, phosphate, phosphonate, and magnesium stearate. So this actually has half the heat release rate of normal polyurethane and no more smoke than the unflame retarded material. So that there are many new approaches. Would comment that one hears a lot of discussion, it contains bromine. Well, there are 1,600 different brominated organic compounds found naturally in nature, largely in the marine environment. That is, in the marine environment, one has bromine, has chlorine, and so that nature creates organohalogen compounds for various natural functions. So simply to say that something contains bromine, it's hazardous, is really nonsense.
Which is why we're not trying to ban any chemicals.
I understand that, but let me ask this question with the statement that Senator Leno read about IKEA, the Swedish manufacturer.
Right.
Are you familiar with that substance that's being used in furniture in California?
Several different kinds of substances, so I'm not quite sure what in IKEA's application he's referring to. I am Swedish, however, so I know IKEA very well.
So am I.
And I think the important point about IKEA is that they do sell in the UK to a standard that's even tougher than California.
And what do they use in the UK? Is it a brominated or chlorinated substance?
I really don't know what they buy in the supply chain, so I don't know what's used.
Mrs. Corbett?
That's my mom's name.
Okay, Senator Corbett.
Okay, so I have a question. Pardon me, sir, who are sitting right here at the end of the table. Please tell me again, could you repeat who you are representing?
I'm Dr. Wendell Bruner. I represent the Health Officers Association of California, which is the Association of Physician Local Health Officials. I have an MD, I have a PhD in biophysical chemistry, and an MPH in environmental epidemiology, so they asked me to come here to speak based on my expertise.
And the role of health officers in each of our communities is, could you just tell us real quick?
The physician health officers exist in each of our communities, in each of our counties, and 3 of our cities, and our responsibility is to protect and promote the health of the public. We are both concerned about toxic chemicals, and also we're equally concerned about fire safety. And that's an important public health issue.
Okay.
And I want to point... Yeah.
My question was answered, thank you. But my next question is, we've now heard that these chemicals are being phased out, and I would just like to hear a response to that. Clearly, that statement is being made for us to maybe say, oh, wow, they're going to be phased out, so we don't have to worry about them anymore. But obviously there is an ongoing concern that many people here were testifying about a little earlier. So what is your ongoing concern, despite the fact that these chemicals are being phased out? What is the health concern that you
Our health concern is that these chemicals are very similar in structure to PCBs and also dioxins, which are two of the most toxic chemicals that we have to deal with in the environment in terms of threats to public health. They're structurally similar to them. There's a large number of different chemicals that are structurally related to each other, have similar chemical properties, and often similar toxic effects. So when we finally determine that one of these chemicals, penta, for example, has a sufficiently proven toxic effect in humans, we take it out. But we replace it with another chemical that's often very, very similar structurally that just hasn't been studied in humans very well. This is the sort of toxic whack-a-mole. You can knock one out once you demonstrate that it's toxic in humans, but then you replace it with some other chemical that, like, nobody's shown that it's toxic in humans because, like, nobody looks.
So the phase-out's not going to stop the health risk?
No, it's just a recycling process.
Thank you very much. And I have one more question of the author, and I know there may be other people who want to speak, but I'm glad to make the motion when the time comes, Mr. Chair. Of the author, you had several witnesses speaking here today, people from fire safety and doctors, many doctors here today with health concerns. Were those witnesses all here as volunteers, or any of those paid witnesses?
No, we have no budget to bring anybody here, so everyone traveled here on their own dime. They testified without any support from anybody. They're here because their heart brought them here
right,
out
because
of their
of the
busy lives.
Concern about
Did not
health
make money
issues.
as the opposition has made money from this.
Thank you very much. That was my question, and whenever you would like a motion, Mr. Chair, I'm ready.
Any other comments? Mr. Emerson?
Well, I would like to follow up. You use the term, none of these products have been tested in humans, because we don't test those products in humans. Is that not correct?
Well, it's very difficult to do these experiments in humans. There's laws against that kind of thing.
Well, that's exactly my
Good laws.
point. So you're criticizing a new product here that's not a brominated or chlorinated product that the industry is presenting as an alternative. Yet you criticize them for a new product, yet you have no concept of what it is or what it's doing.
What we are asking for, we're not asking to ban any product. We're not specifically criticizing any product here.
No, I've heard you say that, but you're critical of this product because of its impact on the health. You tell me.
I'm unfamiliar with that product. I can't be critical with it.
I'm talking about the chlorinated or brominated product. You're critical of that, and you've testified against it. Yet you say you have no data what its impact is on humans because it hasn't been tested.
Right, but it's been tested on animals, and it does terrible things to them. That's the point.
So do you want to make a comment about this new product?
I'm unfamiliar with the new product. I can't knowledgeably speak about it.
Chairman, you've been very generous with your time. I'd be happy to close as quickly as I can.
I think that'd be appropriate at this time.
Thank you. Okay, and again, just to get back to Senator Emerson's concerns, I didn't want to argue safety or unsafety of any chemicals. We're just saying, you heard the compelling testimony from the firefighters, from our other witnesses. I won't recount everything. We're not trying to ban anything. We're not trying to alter AB 117, the flammability standard. We're just saying that we know more now, 35 years after its creation. Let's look at how other parts of the country and other parts of the world are preventing fires, and that's through a smolder standard. And just so everyone understands, TB 117 was designed to withstand a Bunsen burner flame for 12 seconds. The foam inside your sofa cushion, the fires start on the fabric. So That's not a real-life test. But again, we're not saying we should do away with it. But what does make sense is to have a smolder standard, which is why the Federal Consumer Product Safety Commission has designed a smolder standard. And that is what we are suggesting our department and our Bureau of Home Furnishings create. So again, there is consumer choice, equally fire safe. And when you say, Mark, how can you say that it's going to be equally fire safe? Because the same bureau that says the one is safe will determine that the other is safe. And the bill also says that if they can't, they won't be required to do so. The bill says that. So there is no risk here. But you know there is risk. You heard all of this commentary. And again, if we do nothing, if we kill this bill and we just keep 117 for another 10 or 20 or 30 years, we're not addressing these very serious risks. And if you do that, I hope you have not only great certainty, perfect certainty that there is no risk to human health by continuing to doing what we're doing, because we're going to mandate that we continue it and prevent any other option to meet an equally fire-safe standard, and that you are certain that the current standard is 100% fire-safe. And again, I'll show you the studies that show that it's not. So if I could, I'm happy to take another question, but then I just want to finish.
I just want one follow-up.
Sure, of course. I think it's a comment, not a question.
Well, it's
Okay, go ahead.
the Swedish manufacturer. You did not tell me what product they use, and it sounded to me, as you read the letter, that they make one standard for all the United States. Now, what is it that they're doing that's different than what the U.S. industry is doing?
They make some of their furniture, and I'm just gathering what I can, Senator, from this letter. I'm not an expert in what IKEA does or doesn't do. But I'm looking at this letter, and it says that they try to minimize the usage of flame retardants, and that because of TB 117, we have a special range of upholstered furniture articles that contain flame retardants for sale in North America. We would find it very hard to market this range in other countries. So the other ways, and Dr. Bloom can address this as well, there are different fabrics that are fire resistant, and there are construction of materials that can prevent these, through a smolder standard, prevent the fire from starting.
Show me the data. Sure.
I did work. I did work in the 70s. I got a chemical called chlorinated tris out of kids' pajamas because it was a carcinogen. So IKEA uses chlorinated tris, and they're very unhappy about it. And they wrote me to ask me, could I suggest some substitutes? And we've had a bunch of discussions, and that's how come they happened to write this letter. They don't usually say we don't really want to interfere in American things, but they are genuinely extremely unhappy to have to use chlorinated tris. But they said because of TB 117, they have no choice, and they said that the standards they follow, they feel are more protective without toxic chemicals. So anyway, that's what it is. It's chlorinated tris. If anybody has an IKEA couch chair, since 2006, you have chlorinated tris. It's semi-volatile. It comes out, ends up in dust, ends up in your bodies. If you have a chair from before 2004, when this legislature banned Penta, you have Penta in your chair. And just to say, it is an environmental justice issue, because furniture has a 30-year lifespan, so who's going to have Penta in their bodies for 30 more years? And we didn't get to hear from two amazing speakers. We ran out of time. But the people who've done the human health results came here today to report there are a lot of human health results, and that's very unusual. So
I want to thank witnesses on both sides. It's been a very energetic discussion. Is there a motion?
Can I just finish my close? I got interrupted by Dr. Emerson. Very briefly.
Very briefly.
I just want to point out, colleagues, and again, I thank you very much for your attention and for your time, that the United States Environmental Protection Agency put out a bulletin last summer, and in it, it discusses their concern with PBDEs. And it says, and I'm reading from their memo, to reduce exposure to toxic flame retardants, this is our federal government speaking to us, avoid upholstered furniture and baby products that meet TB 117, the California Furniture Flammability Standard. So our federal government is telling consumers, if you want to avoid toxic flame retardants, their words, avoid our products. These are likely to contain PBDEs or similar flame retardants, again, these new kinds, other kinds, and there is no data, this is the US EPA speaking here, there is no data to show TB 117 reduces fire deaths. So again, I'm not here to say whose arguments are the strongest, the best, more determinate. All we're saying is let's allow consumers to have a choice. We've got all of these consumer groups who are looking for an alternative. If there were no health concern here, the Physicians for Social Responsibility would not be in support of our bill, or the American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists, Breast Cancer Action, Breast Cancer Fund, the Health Officers Association of California. There is the firefighters. There is a real risk here. We can do it better. We can do it in a 21st century way if you allow our Bureau of Home Furnishings to create an equally safe fire safety standard that won't require these chemicals. And I do want to point out once again that as I was surrounded by this opposition, I was the only one at this table that was not receiving dollars from the chemical industry. These people were brought here with industry dollars. So I would ask for your very thoughtful, I vote to allow this conversation to continue a little bit further. You don't want to vote for it on the floor, that's your choice, but why this bill should die in its first policy committee would concern me very much. I'd ask for your I vote.
Move the bill.
Madam Secretary, call the roll.
Price?
No.
Price, no. Emerson? Corbett?
Aye.
Corbett, aye. Correa?
No.
Correa, no. Hernandez? Negretti McLeod? Vargas? No. Vargas, no. Walters? No. Walters, no. Wyland?
Okay, so 1-4, that bill is on call.
Thank you very much for your time and for your thoughtfulness.
Thank you. Okay, Dr. Emerson, you're up. Up next. Who?
Oh, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry.
Wait a minute.
Who's here? Oh, Gene.
I'm sorry.
Mr. Chair,
Madam Superintendent.
should the bill not get out today, I would request reconsideration next week.
Yes.
Thank you.
We'll do that. Assemblywoman Fuller, the floor is yours.
Thank you. First, I'd like to start by thanking your staff for providing the support that we needed to be here today. And this bill, SB 619, is a fairly simple bill. It will provide an exemption for flight instructors and flight schools who do not require students to enter into contracts of indebtedness and who do not accept payment for services in advance in excess of $2,500 from being regulated by the Bureau of Private Post-Secondary Education. Until reauthorization of the Bureau by this legislature in 2009, individual flight instructors and flight instruction schools were not subject to the regulatory authority of the state. Pilots in training can take a lesson one day from an instructor, move to another state with the logbook and flying time recorded there, pick right up where they left off with any FAA certified instructor. This is very different from the model of instruction that most of the other post-secondary schools that the Bureau was designed to regulate. It is much more like the exemption for art and photography classes, which are exempted if the payment is less than $2,500. We understand that there might be a role for the state to play here in terms of financial protection. Therefore, we have set the level at $2,500, as the President explains. And those large agencies who do require advance payment and arrange for loans on behalf of their students and accept large payments and require payments larger than $2,500 will be subject to the regulations set forth in the Bureau. My personal experience is this, that most private pilots, my husband and myself, have found that most people who give instruction for licenses, especially in rural areas, are mom and pop kinds of pilots. They do it because they love the hobby and they love to help others, and this is entirely making it impossible for them to continue in this business. I know I would not have gained my flying experience without such an instructor. I paid him $5 every time I had $5, and I had 2 or 3 different ones because we moved. My husband did the same thing. We've flown since we were 24 because of that structure. And I just really think that we haven't thought this part through. And so we really need this exemption to allow those people to operate. Now, the big schools where you're going to become a helicopter pilot and go out and actually fly for a living and make money off of that, that needs to continue under the current regulations. That's just a little different. So I have witnesses here to testify on behalf. I know you've had a long, long day. We're going to try to keep it really short, and if you have questions, then we'll answer them.
Move the bill.
Thank you.
Witnesses in support?
Well, thank you. My name is Mark Willey. Thank you. My name is Mark Willey. I'm the Chief Executive Officer of Bridgeford Flying Services in Napa, California. We provide a number of aviation services to our customers that come to the airport, and I'm here today on support of this bill, and I thought also I'll attempt to keep my comments very short and answer questions if I could to clarify. We don't look at ourselves pretty much in this industry as a school, a post-secondary school, as most people would think. We really look at it more of a customer service, if you would. We don't require, as the majority of flight providers don't, money up front. And as mentioned, customers come and go. We're regulated from a proficiency standpoint, from a safety standpoint, and if this bill was about safety, I'd be the first one here to support it. But we're regulated already there by the federal government, and in the federal government, they give the authorization to the state. So the state of California has a local FSDO office that also regulates flight schools and the instructors for their proficiency, for their safety, and how they do. So we didn't see how this bill really helps us. As I sit back and I think about my son and my wife who are learning to fly, or my son learned and my wife is flying now, I think she's doing that so she can tell me everything that I do wrong. But anyway, when I think about that and the ability for my family to do it and other people to do it in the state, and I think about this bill, I think we'll lose some flight schools. And I think when we lose flight schools, we'll lose more than those jobs. We'll lose other things that flight schools bring, or flight academies, or whatever you would like to call them. We'll lose the revenue from the sale of avgas, or the fuel that goes in the plane. We may lose property tax because someone down the road might not fly here, might not buy a plane, and those property taxes go to our flight schools. So what do we really, or go to our school system? So what are we really accomplishing with this goal? And I just couldn't find what it was, and I felt obligated to come here today in my support of this bill and state that. I guess at the end of the day, I'm not aware of any other state that imposes similar regulations is being proposed here. So until, as an industry, we understand, and maybe there's a better way to accomplish whatever the goal is. And again, if the goal is just to protect the consumer from a financial standpoint, I think this bill does that. So thank you for your time.
Any other witnesses in support?
Good afternoon. My name is Mark Santacroce. I'm an independent flight instructor. I have a business that's incorporated in the state of California. I'm representing myself, but I've discussed my testimony with over 80 flight instructors in schools over the past weekend. Since I last testified during the last legislative session, I have had to suspend my business. I could not afford the $250 to apply for an exemption from the BPPE, and also because of the provisions of SB 856, I was hesitant to self-identify to the agency when I had already not been identified and given a letter. I'm now in a position to resume my flight instruction. Depending on the outcome of this hearing, I intend to do that in May. However, if the measure does not pass, I will not be able to shoulder both the administrative and the financial burdens imposed by current BPPE regulations. I and many other flight schools and independent instructors that I've spoken to will be forced to close our operations. I fully acknowledge why flight instruction is intended to come under the provisions of the BPPE. But those of us who did not take money up front are not the problem. We never were the problem. The last legislature granted us a stay of execution until the 1st of July, but our sentencing takes place today with your vote. And I urge you to support this measure, and thank you for your attention.
Thank you.
John Pfeiffer, California Regional Representative of the National Aircraft Owners and Pilots Association, in support of the bill. AB 48 clearly stated up front that it was the intent of the legislature to ensure a regulatory structure that provides for an appropriate level of oversight. If there is no financial risk to the student, then we would propose that putting instructors out of business is not an appropriate regulatory framework. Jim Lights, representing the California Airports Council, was also here. The California Airports Council is in support of the bill as well. He had to leave for an appointment, so he asked me to mention that he was here to support the council.
Thank you. Any other testimony in support? Any in opposition? Any comments? Any motions? Mr. Correa. Senator Correa first.
Just very quickly, are all of you pilots?
I'm not a current pilot. I have a medical condition.
Safe to say you're all pilots and you're all wearing glasses.
You can wear glasses.
My question is,
would you like to learn how to fly?
Restate to me the problem with the existing law.
The current problem.
What's wrong with the existing?
They're exempted under the current situation. They're exempted from the new law because the new law basically says that you have to put up you have to put up a bond, and you have several notifications that you have to do in contracts.
Okay.
That if you are not taking any money up front that you don't need. In other words, if I'm going to charge you $60,000 to come to my flight school, then I need those protections. I need to have a contract, and I need to have a bond so that if I don't finish giving you those lessons or you don't pass properly, you can get that back. If you're like me and you're out in Coalinga when I was taking my flying lessons and you had $5 and you went to pay your friend down the street who was the certified flight instructor and he didn't ask any money from you up front, you didn't need a contract, and he didn't need a bond. That's the way most of the little flight schools are. So this requirement puts them sort of out of business. Most of them will only have 5 or 10 customers a year. They're not big business people. And most of the people who are going to become private pilots, they don't know necessarily that they're going to actually get their commercial pilot's license later and earn it back. So they're kind of hobbyist kinds of people. So for me, why I took this bill on is because I know my husband and I would never have ever gotten to be pilots, especially in Coalinga, Lemoore, and all the places that I followed my husband around. And I know that a lot of other people won't either. And I just think that the commerce in California needs to be able to support that. It's been an incredible force in my life to be able to have it, and I want others to be able to have it. And I know that this is not needed. It's just not needed. The protection is not needed at a certain level.
Thank you.
I just ask for your vote. Thank you.
Made the motion? Madam Secretary, call the roll.
Price.
Aye.
Price, aye. Emerson.
Aye.
Emerson, aye. Corbett. Correa.
Aye.
Correa, aye. Hernandez. Negretti McLeod. Negretti McLeod, aye. Vargas.
Aye.
Vargas, aye. Walters.
Aye.
Walters, aye. Wyland. Wyland, aye. 7-0 right now.
Bill is out. Thank you.
On call.
Thank you.
Put it on call.
Bill on call.
Yeah. Now we're to Emerson. I'm sorry.
Okay, Mr. Dr. Senator.
Thank you, Chair and members. Senate Bill 431 will increase consumer protection and ensure the proper disposal of prescription drugs. Well, that thing's trying to Get that away from here.
Now you know what it feels like.
Yeah, under current law, a pharmacy cannot return prescription drugs to a manufacturer or wholesaler once the medicine has been dispensed to a patient. For those pharmacies who wish to establish a prescription drug take-back program, Senate Bill 431 will ensure that these return drugs are properly disposed of by a licensed hazardous waste hauler. That is, if those drugs have been opened and partially used and dispersed. This bill also clarifies the current board license reversal distributors will continue to be responsible for handling prescription drugs that have not been dispersed to patients but are being removed from the pharmaceutical supply chain. SB 431 will add provisions that will reduce the time required for a board to investigate a licensee if there is evidence of a drug theft or impairment. This bill will also prohibit an individual whose pharmacist license has been revoked in California from working in another state as a pharmacist who will dispense medications to California by mail. I respectfully ask for your aye vote on this important consumer protection measure, and I'd like to introduce Virginia Harold from the Board of Pharmacy to make a statement and answer any questions you may have.
I will be brief. The bulk of these provisions came and arose last year out of the Department of Consumer Affairs interest in the Consumer Protection Enforcement Initiative, driving our timelines for submitting information to the board down. So we are working with the associations to remove some concerns they have, but we still will have, even after, and we're pretty nearly done with that phase, have a real solid bill that will give us information from our licensees a little faster that allows us to investigate cases a little more timely. One of the concerns is how do we enforce the provisions dealing with the mail order pharmacy where a pharmacist will go to work in another state, we've revoked them. How can we be sure that that individual does not ship drugs into California? Once a year they have to renew their license, and on that list of renewal they identify who's working in the pharmacy. So we would place the burden on the non-resident pharmacy to keep abreast of this and to make sure that if we do revoke a pharmacist, they can't go into another state and ship drugs into the state.
Any other questions? Any other comments in support? In opposition?
Jim Gross on behalf of the California Pharmacists Association. We haven't opposed unless amended, and first let me thank the author because his office reached out to us very early on these issues, gave us an opportunity to provide some input. We have submitted proposed amendments to Ms. Harold and are hopeful that we can reach agreement on those. We seem to be making good progress, so we're looking forward to the opportunity to remove our opposition. Thank you.
This bill will be referred to EQ, and so we're working with them, and we believe that we can make all those corrections at that time.
Is that your pledge to do that? You have your pledge to do that?
We certainly will work with them. Absolutely.
Okay, good. Any other comments? Is there a motion? Yeah. Okay, Madam. The motion is due pass to Rules Committee.
Price?
Aye.
Price, aye. Emerson? Aye. Emerson, aye. Corbett? Correa? Hernandez? Grady McLeod? Grady McLeod, aye. Vargas? Aye. Vargas, aye. Walters? Aye. Walters, aye. Wyland? Aye. Wyland, aye. That's 6-0 on call.
Okay, 6-0, it's on call.
Thank you very much.
Walters.
Okay. Senator Walters.
Yeah, he's got one after. This one's on consent. So we'll do this one. And then Grady McLeod. And then you.
You want the same result?
Remember, we're both Catholic.
Senator, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members. Today I present to the committee Senate Bill 692. SB 692 recognizes the need for California to reform the Engineers Act. The California legislature conducted a study 10 years ago showing that California is the only state in the nation that restricts the practice of engineering to only one specific type of engineer. Our legislature and the affected enforcement agencies found that the current restriction limiting the engineering profession is outdated and does not recognize the full scope and diversity of engineering practices. The Board of Professional Engineers, Land Surveys, and Geologists sponsored a bill in 2005 to reform the law. It was opposed by PECG and CELSOC, now ACEC, and defeated. Last year, I authored SB 275, and it was also opposed and defeated. As a result, California law limits engineering technologies to 1950 standards. Our state needs to access to all of the modern technologies that exist in order to realize the benefits of the new economy. In fact, we will need to develop technologies that don't yet exist, but whose inception are the focus of the engineering experts we must rely upon to progress along with the rest of the nation. As our outdated engineering law is increasingly enforced, the efforts to develop renewable energy, reduce greenhouse gases, and build high-speed rail will be severely impaired because only civil engineers may provide technical services. The facilities involved in these programs of the future are fixed works, and the law says only civil engineers can be involved in their creation. The Obama administration, which is providing many large grants to our state, will likely be shocked to learn that by law in California, only civil engineers are permitted to design fuel cells, wind and solar facilities, and redesign existing power plants, manufacturing facilities, and refineries to utilize green technologies and to reduce carbon emissions. California cannot continue to fail to utilize the best qualified types of engineers if we are to remain on the cutting edge of the new economy. In every other state in the nation, the entire engineering profession plays an integral role in these types of projects. The people of California expect our state to lead the country in the new green economy. This bill will go a long way toward giving Californians a law they believe should exist and a law that they deserve. And with me today is Donald Reisner and Andrea Fox, who can answer your questions regarding SB 692.
Thank you.
Good evening. I'll keep my comments brief since it's late.
Right. Good evening, not good night, so we're still working.
I'm Andrea Fox with the California Farm Bureau, and we're the sponsors of this bill. This is an effort to update current law. It's a 60-year-old law, and a lot has happened in the last 60 years that require more engineering expertise. For example, farmers and ranchers that I represent now must deal with stringent water quality, air quality, environmental, and food safety requirements. These requirements need the expertise offered by an engineer who has the education, experience to practice with competence in these particular areas. In the current law, Title Act engineers are not permitted to be in responsible charge of a project and must have a civil engineer give final approval for a project he or she may not have worked on or may not have the education or the particular experience for. All engineers must take the same type of course study to get their engineering degrees. The agricultural, chemical control system, fire protection, industrial, metallurgical, nuclear, petroleum, and traffic engineers go on to gain additional education, experience, and proficiency in their particular fields. This bill will eliminate the two-tiered system and will require competence for any engineer who practices engineering no matter what field they practice in. Farm Bureau believes that this is in the best interest of the public to regulate all engineering disciplines in the same manner. SB 692 will do that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Don Reisner, representing the California Legislative Council of Professional Engineers, and we're in support of the bill. It's an organization of many professional engineering societies, so thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Jane Townsend, manager of the California Agricultural Irrigation Association. Many of our members use agricultural engineers for irrigation systems, and this bill would allow those engineers to practice in a field in which they have particular expertise, and we ask your support.
Thank you. Any other witnesses in support? Any in opposition?
Mr. Chairman, members, Mark Smith on behalf of the American Council of Engineering Companies of California. We are here in opposition to this bill today, as we have been here previously in opposition to the bill. I think, we should really talk about the reasons why this bill is being introduced. It's not being introduced because Title Act engineers are not capable, competent people who are currently allowed to practice in the field of engineering. It's because they are concerned that their scope of practice is not exclusively limited to them. That is the difference between a Title Act and a Practice Act engineer in the statute. But in doing so, and in the protections that they want to provide for the scope of the services that they do, they are confusing, causing overlap in the profession of engineering, and are elevating themselves to a standard of engineering practice that they are not qualified to perform. Title Act engineers are not civil engineers, they are not mechanical engineers, they are not electrical engineers. There is a reason why Title Act engineers are not always allowed to be engineers in responsible charge of a project. Now, the committee analysis points out that there should be no overlapping issues related to the practice of the elevation of Title Acts to Practice Acts. I'd like to read to you the first sentence from the sponsor's own letter of support, which is, "This bill is devised to revise the Professional Engineers Act to regulate all engineering disciplines in the same manner. It would allow overlap between disciplines without arbitrary restrictions." What we would do here is we would create the practice of engineering where engineers would be in turf battles with each other, and clients who needed engineering services would not know whether they needed a chemical engineer or a civil engineer, whether they needed an agricultural engineer or a mechanical engineer. It would create confusion in a system that works perfectly well in California today. As pointed out by the analysis, there are almost 80,000 registered engineers in the state of California. 74,000 of those engineers are current Practice Act engineers. It is the small minority of the engineering community, 6,000, less than 10% of the engineering community, that is pushing this bill and urging these dramatic changes that will affect the practice of engineering. Finally, I'd like to close with an example of the types of concerns we have related to public safety. Again, as demonstrated by the committee analysis on page 9, the division of the state architect and some of the complaints that title engineers have, and I'll read from the analysis. Because fire protection is not considered an approved practice for performance of any education facility related to services, a fire protection engineer cannot perform design or construction related to services on school projects. Their complaint is that they cannot do those services now, and this bill would allow them to do that. Well, I sit here and I tell you today that Senator Corbett has a hearing on Wednesday related to some severe deficiencies related to the construction and oversight of school facility construction in California. And a bill like this that allows non-experienced people who have not sat for a civil or a structural engineering exam to take that level of responsibility flies in the face of the reports that have come out from California Watch and the hearing that Senator Corbett will have on Wednesday. So for these reasons, we are in strong opposition to this bill.
Thank you. Any other comments in opposition?
Mr. Chair, members, Steve Baker with Aaron Reed & Associates, representing the professional engineers in California government. Like Senator Walters says, this does feel a little like Groundhog Day. We're back in opposition to this measure and join our private sector brethren in opposing the measure. Just a couple of quick examples, and I'll make it very brief. This bill elevates these title acts, again, good people like Mark said that do a good job, but for metallurgical engineers or chemical engineers, we've asked for some examples of what is metallurgical engineering or chemical engineering. And the answer is, well, anytime you change the composition of metal or anytime there's a chemical reaction. Well, if you limit that to those people, and civil engineers can no longer do that, it means you can't draw specifications that require a weld or require cement, because that's a chemical reaction. Those are some of the problems that we see with the bill and why we remain opposed to it in its current iteration.
Thank you. Any other comments in opposition? Members, any questions, comments, motions?
I'll make a motion.
Okay, we have a due pass to appropriations.
Price.
Aye.
Price, aye. Emerson. Emerson, aye. Corbett. Correa. Hernandez. Nip-Gretty McLeod. Nip-Gretty McLeod, aye. Vargas. Walters.
Aye.
Walters, aye. Wyland. Wyland, aye. That's 5-0 right now on call.
5-0. It'll be on call. Thank you.
Okay, now we have
Okay, who is it? Wyland?
Walters. Wyland, yes.
Yes. Colonel Wyland, the floor is yours.
Just finished 692.
Yep.
What was on call, so we'll call.
You leaving me, big guy? I'm back. Back before you know it.
Wyland, you have file item number 9, Senate Bill 744 on water submeters testing. You may present.
You know, as someone whose name ends in WY, I'm very used to being one of the last.
Price is going to be behind you, though.
Oh, my gosh. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members. Senate Bill 744 deals with water submetering. Water submetering is an approach to determining how much water is used by individuals or families that the Environmental Protection Agency estimates saves up to or nearly 30% of use of water. So this is obviously a very good thing in terms of water conservation and meeting all the various standards that we'd like to see. My own city in San Diego recently adopted a submetering ordinance that required all new multifamily housing be built with submeters in each dwelling unit. I think more local governments are likely to follow. What this bill does is respond to complaints by submeter manufacturers that getting approval for use of these devices in California is very uncertain and can subject manufacturers to criminal liability if their products fail initial testing. I really don't think this is what we intend in California. The Master Meter Company, which is the nation's largest producer of submeters, along with other submeter manufacturers, has actually stopped shipping submeters to the state of California because of the added criminal liability for simply submitting their submeters for testing if they happen to fail. What this bill does is amend the Business and Professions Code to allow submeters previously tested at a facility certified to meet California's performance standards as established by the National Institute of Scientific Technology. And it amends the B&P code to clarify that submeters placed in service refers only to those installed in apartment units for use by residents and not simply those submitted for testing. To explain the bill in greater detail, I'm joined by Mark Treitler, Senior Vice President of Conservice Corporation and Chairman of the Utility Conservation Coalition, which is a consortium of national companies providing submetering and billing services to the multifamily housing industry.
Thank you, Senator. Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, I'm Mark Treitler, Vice President and General Counsel of Conservice. We provide utility billing services nationwide. We're at about 700,000 units. We serve nationwide and over 100,000 here in California, and that's just my company. I'm also a member of the Utility Conservation Coalition, which is a consortium of the largest 7 to 8 submetering companies in the country, and has been around for about 10 years. During that time, we've been actively involved in conservation efforts in many states and have been involved in dozens of state regulations promoting water conservation in state capitals. Most recently, we were involved in the development of the ordinance, as Senator Wyland reported, in San Diego that was adopted unanimously. We're pleased to sponsor this bill as a way to streamline the process in California for approving submeters and ensuring an adequate supply of these water-saving devices. I'm happy to respond to any questions about the measure or provide additional technical detail regarding the use of submeters.
Mr. Chairman and members, Steve Carlson, I represent the Utility Conservation Coalition as sponsor of the bill, as well as the apartment associations of Greater Los Angeles, San Diego, and Santa Barbara that support the bill. As the analysis really accurately points out, submetering is the best way to improve conservation in multifamily properties. San Diego figured that out. We are also, but in order for it to work, there has to be an adequate supply and a facility of being able to obtain these submeters. We are also, as the analysis points out, working with Mr. Fong on a bill on the Assembly side, which would oppose a submetering mandate statewide. And in order for any of that to work, there has to be adequate supplies of meters. So we think this is a win-win. Facilitate the process for meters and enhance conservation. So we ask your aye vote.
Thank you. Additional witnesses in support?
Mr. Chairman and members, Tim Shannon representing the California Apartment Association. For the reasons previously stated, noted in your analysis, we also support the bill. Will increase the availability of submeters. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, committee members, I'm Silvio Ferrari, staff engineer with the California Building Industry Association, also here in support. I'd like to just echo the comments that were previously made and then also add from the builder's perspective that as we continue to see legislation and local ordinances aimed at mandating submeters, it's absolutely imperative for our industry to have that access to a reliable source of submeters. Currently, right now, we have projects that are in design and even some under construction with the intentions to go in and install submeters, only to find out that there isn't any available hot water submeter in the state of California. In a state of California where our water conservation goals are what they are, that seems just completely inadequate. We look forward to working on this bill more, and we urge your aye vote. Thank you.
Thank you. Witnesses in opposition?
Good afternoon. I'm Bob Atkins. I'm president of the California Agricultural Commissioner and Sealers Association, and we're appearing before you to urge a no vote on Senate Bill 744. Just heard an interesting thing. It's the first time I've seen that one of the issues is hot water submeters, and that has been a traditional problem in the state of California. We have trouble with hot water meters holding type approval and performing correctly. Cold water meters, because they're at a reasonably constant temperature, are very able to hold their accuracy. The problem with hot water meters is you have a fluctuation of temperature because the water starts off cold. As it heats up and progresses through the meter, you get expansion, contraction of the parts of the meter, which can change the performance of that meter. With regards to the other meters, I'd like to read a brief statement. As stated in our letter to your committee, it is essential that commercial weighing and measuring devices are tested before they are placed into service. This situation, as in most uses of commercial scales and meters, the consumer has no means or opportunity to test the accuracy of the device when in use. What is proposed is that there be no independent testing before installation and no notification of the meters being placed into service. This puts both the landlord and the tenant at a disadvantage. Weights and Measures checks devices to assure both parties are treated fairly in any commercial transaction. This bill essentially proposes that all parties trust the manufacturer regardless of where they choose to produce their meters. After installation, it is inconvenient for all to have the meters removed rather than tested before installation. Neither the tenant nor the landlord can verify their accuracy, and only gross errors would raise suspicion that the meter is not performing accurately. So even complaints can't be used as an indication of poor performance. The sponsor asserts that the errors in the testing are inconsistencies of our test equipment rather than a failure of their meters. Yet when tested since 1996-97, the compliance rates have generally improved from the lows of 71.7% in 2000, 2001, and 77% in 97, 98, to a high of 92.6% in 03 and 04. These were the meters tested before installation and routinely tested as submitted from the landlords. This result shows a general trend of improvement as more counties centrally test utility submeters in their metrology labs. Still, these meters do not perform as well as petroleum fuel meters, which generally are nearly 98% compliant, with the 2% errors being virtually equally distributed in favor of both the buyer and the seller. The meter manufacturers currently attach their test results to the meters, and yet many of these meters fail. The sponsor proposes that we trust these results without independent verification. They claim to have better testing procedures, but they don't say that they comply with those currently required by the National Institute of Standards and Technology's handbooks. They do not say in the bill to what standards they will be held or what independent oversight will be provided, if any. Also, how can these procedures be verified if they are outside of California or outside the U.S.? They claim that the errors in our tests were due to repeatability tests, when in fact our 3 test runs are at different rates of flow. This is done to see if the meter delivers consistently as used both at high and low rates of flow. You as consumers know that you rarely use large volumes of water at one flow rate. Your dishwashers, washing machines are on and off. The kitchen and bathroom use is on and off and high and low flows. While wearing our agricultural hat and as responsible citizens, we are certainly in support of water conservation. However, that should be encouraged through accurate measure of the product. What is measured can be controlled, but fairness to tenants and landlords cannot be sacrificed in the process. The sponsor is asking that we just trust them. However, we believe in the motto, trust but verify. Once again, we urge your no vote on Senate Bill 744. Thank you.
Yes, good evening, Chairman Price and members of the committee. I'm Kurt Florin. I'm the Director of Weights and Measures for the County of Los Angeles, but I'm here to speak to you tonight, or I guess it's tonight now, as the Vice President of Weights and Measures for the California Ag Commissioners and Sealers Association, otherwise known as CACASA. And I and CACASA do urge your no vote on SB 744. As you're aware, SB 744 seeks to remove regulatory oversight that's currently provided by the State Division of Measurement Standards and county sealers of weights and measures through the exemption of water submeters from long-standing state laws governing the testing and sealing of such meters by licensed weights and measures officials. This proposal is apparently based upon test data generated internally from a limited number of meter manufacturers, as well as a brief limited survey or study rather hastily performed 2 years ago involving only 31 water submeters from only 5 manufacturers to address concerns raised principally about what were considered excessive failure rates on repeatability tests on some models and designs of meters. Specifically, this bill would provide that, quote, any water submeter tested by a test bench that's regularly calibrated by a cross-check measure shall be deemed to be tested and sealed and approved for commercial use. Now, these provisions leave a number of issues entirely unclear. What does regularly calibrated mean? Who determines the parameters or the frequency of regularly? Is such a measure to be required to be traceable to standards maintained by the National Institute of Standards and Technology, are such to be subject to any kind of routine verification by weights and measures officials, are the testing procedures or any apparatus to be used by manufacturers subject to verification by any third party, none of that specified. Under what verification of submitted data is the authority for testing and sealing to be granted to the very manufacturers and sellers of water submeter devices? I would submit to your committee that there has been no independent review of the manufacturer data, and the exemption of water submeters from weights and measures oversight would constitute a dramatic departure from the regulatory oversight provided to virtually all other types of weighing and measuring devices. Now, on this latter point, I think it's critical that your committee recognize that the weights and measures regulatory system in California is based upon work done on a national level, which is through the combined efforts of members of the National Conference on Weights and Measures, of which I'm the incoming chairman, to develop model laws and regulations for adoption and implementation by all states across the country in order to provide for uniformity enforcement, uniformity in device design and performance requirements, and uniformity in requirements for the use and testing of devices to protect both manufacturers and consumers in the marketplace. This bill would exempt only a single category of device, water submeters, from the protective regulatory oversight afforded to consumers and manufacturers that exist for virtually every other type of gas pump, scale, every weighing and measuring device in the marketplace. This bill is a premature action in response to incomplete and inconclusive data. While I've not had the opportunity to review the data developed by the manufacturers and have no information regarding the traceability of their volume standards or the integrity of their testing systems, I have in fact re-reviewed the data collected from a minority of county weights and measures agencies back in 2009. And while the proponents of SB 744 are drawing fairly dramatic conclusions from the results, it's critical to note a few key points about that data. First, that state data reflects information from 14 jurisdictions. That's only half of the counties who are performing inspections on water submeters. It reflects test results for only 27 individual positive displacement meters, which are from only 4 manufacturers. And the data provides no model information, nothing. It makes it impossible to determine just how representative the data is of all that's in the marketplace. When it comes to multi-jet meters, the data reflects results for only 4 individual meters from 2 manufacturers. That cannot be deemed statistically valid for drawing final conclusions, and it has to be noted that even within that data report, the results for test of multi-jet meters under current Handbook 44 draft sizes bears the statement, note, data set too small, results are inconclusive. So in spite of this, SB 744 has been proposed as before you for consideration. It proposes to circumvent the independent testing and sealing by licensed weights and measures officials using traceable standards and nationally developed and accepted test procedures by placing all of the oversight in the hands of the manufacturers themselves, who of course have a vested interest in the approval and sales of their devices. And again, this would be a dramatic deviation from the procedures and the requirements applicable to every other type of device. In a letter submitted April 13th to the author, Senator Weiland, by the Utility Conservation Coalition, it suggested that the 09 study is entirely conclusive and due to variations in test result findings that, quote, the same meter tested 3 consecutive times on the same test bench should have the same results. The relevant tests show the opposite. 22 of the 29 benches failed this basic test. Well, that utterly ignores the real possibility that variations in test results are due to the failure of the meter or of certain meters to actually produce consistent results and provide repeatability in measurements. Now, these issues have been studied and addressed over recent years by the National Conference on Weights and Measures. For example, in 2004, for multi-jet water submeters specifically, there was an amendment for tolerances applied there for what had decades been 1.5% for over-registration, 5% for under-registration. Those were shifted to plus and minus 3% for those types of meters. Additionally, this last year in 2010, draft sizes for larger 1.5 and 2-inch meters were amended 100% from 50 gallons up to 100 gallons for intermediate tests, and were changed tenfold from 10 gallons to 100 gallons for the minimum rates. And also last year, the applicable tolerances for repeatability tests for these submeters increased tolerances for intermediate and minimum flow rates more than threefold, changing from 0.6% up to 2% and 4% respectively. And now you're asked, in spite of these national efforts, to actually relax or expand the tolerances for water submeters, to exempt them entirely from the independent and qualified and uniform standards developed nationally and adopted by most, if not all, states. So it may be that the further study is needed to ensure that all equipment in various weights and measures agencies are consistently maintained and utilized, and perhaps the manufacturing industry can demonstrate that there are legitimate questions. But the recent draft size and tolerance amendments adopted by the National Conference have only come into effect this calendar year, as of January 1st. And the data on which this bill is proposed bears many points of question and was developed prior to the above-mentioned changes to Handbook 44 through the National Conference. Weights and measures officials are dedicated to accuracy and fairness in the marketplace. We're absolutely in favor of accurate measurement to produce accurate charges to consumers, and certainly support any resulting increases in water conservation from the use of these meters. However, the data on which SB 744 is proposed is questionable at best, and we do urge your no vote on this bill. Thank you.
Chair Price and Senators, my name is Kristen Macy. I'm the Division Director for the Division of Measurement Standards, and I've been asked here by CACASA to provide you with some technical testimony. On the record, CDFA, the California Department of Food and Agriculture, does not have a position on this bill. What I can tell you of technical nature is that here in California, there are 1.4 million commercial weighing and measuring devices that are registered in the state today. Of those, 330 are water submeters. The other meters would include gas pumps, LPG, CNG, taxi meters, scales, all sorts of things that you see where you look at the gas pump and you see that little round sticker of approval. That's what we do. In California, because of its size, we share the power and the regulation with our county counterparts, the county sealers, and we exist to protect buyer and seller, and also to provide that impartial third-party testing that neither favors one or the other in the transaction. This also creates fair competition in the marketplace. Our division is responsible also for ensuring that any new commercial devices that wish to be used, where the manufacturers wish them to be used, undergoes stringent testing before being allowed to be sold commercially. That's what we call type evaluation. Now, we've been doing that since the 1920s. And we use standards so that we ensure reliable commercial equipment is being used in the marketplace. We've been testing water meters at the field level since the mid-1970s. And as our society has been changing and more utility submeters have come into play, we also test electric meters and we also test hydrocarbon vapor meters. As my colleague stated, our division adopts and the state adopts the specifications in Handbook 44. This is a handbook that is published by NIST but created by the National Conference on Weights and Measures. It has been a long day for all of us. This is a consensus organization, and it includes industry members, manufacturers, government officials, and other types of interested parties. And it was mentioned that there was a survey that was performed, and I happened to be on the Specifications and Tolerances Committee at the national level at that time. And California did conduct a quick survey for the National Conference on Weights and Measures, the purpose of which was to provide data that could be considered because there were 5 meter manufacturers that had submitted some proposals and they wanted to change the handbooks. Now, these standards development organizations don't change model laws that are adopted by all 50 states without due process. And we had information from the meter manufacturers, but we really didn't have much from the states. And the reason for that is that California is a leader in this area, and there are very few other state jurisdictions that actually test water meters. The codes in Handbook 44 are there in case the Weights and Measures officials would like to test, but I'll tell you that in North Dakota, they don't test too many taximeters. So California is a little bit unique in that respect. The survey was inconclusive because the numbers were so small. We had asked the meter manufacturers to supply us with meters, and none were forthcoming, so we had to use what we had on the shelves. We verified the true value of the meters using our gravimetric equipment and double-checking it with our volumetric standards, which are traceable to NIST and the international standards of weights and measures. And because it was inconclusive at that time, our standards development organization was reluctant to move forward. And so the proposal languished for another year. But the following year, Mr. Florin is correct, we did make some changes. Since then, the water meter manufacturers have barraged us with proposals. In late 2009 alone, they submitted 9 different proposals that basically threw up everything. They wanted to increase the amount of water that we ran through the meters. They wanted to increase the tolerances for accuracy, increase the range on repeatability, anything in order to get the meters approved.
Let's go on for another half hour.
I apologize. The bottom line, though, is that there is nothing wrong with the system in place. In my estimation, from a weights and measures standpoint, the system is tried and proven.
Any other comments in opposition? You know, this is such an important area. Is there any chance that we can address some of the issues that have been raised by the opposition? It sounds like
absolutely, and
room to work there.
Absolutely, and I'd like to call on my previous testifiers to respond. Just one comment I would like to make, which is that if there's none available, and you want to build, and you want to use them, and they won't ship to California, and you've got a problem. And we heard very detailed testimony about why the current system is good and why it shouldn't be changed and all the problems. But there's a problem here if we're going to conserve water, because you can't get them.
Before the testimony, let's see, did you have a question, Ms.
I actually wanted to ask the author, and there is a problem, and it seems there's a bottleneck here in terms of the meters that are available. And the opposition makes some valid points, which is we have to guard here to make sure that there's accuracy. So I'm trying to find out where we can come to a midpoint, possibly an amendment that would have us come back to this committee in 2 or 3 years, a number of years, to go back and review the data to make sure that we didn't open up the floodgates here, so to speak, no pun intended, but to make sure that that in fact the manufacturers are passing muster, so to speak, doing a good job of manufacturing and testing.
Right.
So my suggestion to the chair here would be, would you accept, the author, an amendment to maybe sunset or review this bill in 3 years or so?
Absolutely. I agree with you that we want these things to be accurate, absolutely accurate. And if any of us were living in an apartment or any place and paying that bill, we want it to be accurate, and it should be. So certainly, absolutely.
We could do sunset and review, right?
Yes.
Right.
Yeah. I think that would be fine, because there's no doubt that they do need to be accurate.
Right. So 3 years?
3 years, I think, is a reasonable period. Any further comments?
Well, that's a wish of the committee. That's fine. That's certainly fine with us.
Yeah. Okay.
Sir, to the chair.
Yes. Oh, we got another. Okay, come on.
Excuse me, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Bob Atkins. Bob Atkins, again with CACASA. My colleagues and I were just discussing this need for additional meters, and frankly, I get pallets of meters in every month. And so I'm a little perplexed at the claim that there is a lack of meters. And these are brand new meters that are being delivered for our inspection. There are replacement meters for those that have been in service. Generally, when water meters are tested, they're taken out of service and they can be refurbished. But often after 10 years, they're quite worn and have a lot of deposits in them. So they're frequently replaced by new meters. And as I say, we have whole pallets being delivered every month, so I really don't understand this claim that there is a shortage. And as my colleague said from Division of Measurement Standards, there are 350,000 of these meters in service in California now, and additional meters being demanded by the building. The building industry actually is fairly quiet. We are doing more servicing of meters that are being replaced and can continue to have their routine inspections. So I'm also a little troubled by a sunset that will allow for no testing for the next 2 to 3 years or whatever the sunset is while we gather additional information. So I continue to ask for your no vote.
Mr. Chair and members, very briefly, Steve Carlson, a couple of very brief points. 49 out of 50 other states do not have the redundant testing of meters that they do here. What we're putting in here is the same exact test that is tested to in California that has to comply with the NIST standards, period. These exact same meters that must be tested again to go into private housing are used and not tested again when they go into public agencies or cities. They work. If they didn't work, they wouldn't be using them. So I think with that, we ask for your vote.
Yeah. Is there any other questions, comments? Would you care to close, Mr. Weiland?
I do ask for your aye vote with that understanding.
The understanding being that you're going to continue working with the opposition to.
Well, absolutely. With
3-year sunset.
With both those, and I think the comment is important. These are being used in this method in all 49 other states.
Is there a motion? Madam Secretary, call the roll. Do pass as amended to appropriate.
Price?
Aye.
Price, aye. Emerson? Aye. Emerson, aye. Corbett? Corbett, aye. Correa? Aye. Correa, aye. Hernandez? Hernandez, aye. Negrete McLeod? Negrete McLeod, aye. Vargas? Aye. Vargas, aye. Walters? Aye. Walters, aye. Wyland? Aye. Unanimous.
Okay, that's out. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, has the consent calendar been moved?
Not yet.
May I move it?
You may.
Yes.
Move it out of here. Let's get it out of here. Yeah, let's do this. Can we move this consent right quick?
Price?
Okay, we're moving the consent calendar. We have one item on consent?
Yes, one item.
Price, aye.
Price, aye. Emerson? Aye. Emerson, aye. Corbett? Aye. Corbett, aye. Correa? Aye. Correa, aye. Hernandez? Hernandez, aye. Negrete McLeod? Negrete McLeod, aye. Vargas? Vargas, aye. Walters? Aye. Walters, aye. Wyland? Aye. Wyland, aye. 9-0.
Okay, that bill is out. Senator Negrete McLeod, floor is yours.
Good evening. Good morning, Mr. Chair and members. SB 773 amends provisions of the Practice Act for certified public accountants, including issues related to the functions of the boards of accountancy. In particular are the sections dealing with the hours of education necessary for an individual to obtain a license. In 2009, the legislature enacted a provision requiring applicants for the CPA license to have at least 150 hours of education, including 10 hours devoted to ethics. Current law requires an advisory committee to develop recommendations for how the 10 hours of ethics training education can be achieved in the academic setting. That committee is in the process of completing these recommendations. It is my expectation that the advisory committee recommendations will require statutory changes, which would eventually be placed in this bill. Those amendments would only go forward with the agreement of all of the original stakeholders that drafted the 2009 legislation. Of course, once that occurs, I would be glad to have the bill returned to this committee for consideration. I respectfully ask for your aye vote.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Any witnesses in support?
Yes. Jim Gross on behalf of the California Society of CPAs. As the Senator said, the ethics requirement is currently being developed by an advisory committee. It's our expectation, along with CPIL, that there may be some statutory changes necessary. We knew that when we put this legislation together back in 2009. And we also make a technical change here. It's important to preserve the role of the advisory committee. So with that, we ask for your aye vote.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, I understand that this is a bill that's just a follow-up on the oversight hearing that this committee actually conducted, and I understand there's also no opposition, so I'd be glad to make a motion on this measure.
Great. Would you care to, well, let me...
Ask for your aye vote.
Is there any opposition? No opposition? Would you care to close?
That's it.
You just closed. Madam Secretary, please call the roll. Aye to...
Do pass to
approach.
Price?
Aye.
Price, aye. Emerson? Aye. Emerson, aye. Corbett? Corbett, aye. Correa?
Aye.
Correa, aye. Hernandez? Hernandez, aye. Negrete McLeod? Negrete McLeod, aye. Vargas? Walters? Aye. Sorry, Vargas, aye. Walters? Wyland?
Aye.
Wyland, aye.
Correa, aye.
Yeah, I got you on that already.
Is that it? My turn?
Walters, aye. Walters, aye. Yeah, it's your turn.
It's a good spot, Bill.
It's a good spot, Bill.
I take it back.
I voted for the Wyland junk killer bills.
Yeah, that's right.
The Wyland junk killer.
Is that a job killer, Wyland?
File item 6.
I take back my amendment.
The chair. 671 on shorthand reporters.
671.
Let's make this a shorthand presentation.
Very good. Mr. Chair and members, today I'm presenting Senate Bill 671, which requires the Court Reporters Board of California to establish continuing education requirements for license renewal for all court reporters. This measure is sponsored by the Deposition Reporters Association and the California Court Reporters Association. There are two types of certified shorthand reporters, those who work as employees of the court system and those who freelance as reporters and report depositions. Under existing state law, licensees must renew their licenses every year and must take and pass 2 different written exams and 1 performance exam as a condition for renewal. Currently, all court staff is required by the Judicial Council to take continuing education courses. However, this requirement excludes freelance reporters, thereby creating an inequity in the professional standards of the license. Nor do these requirements address the lack of structures in place for continuing education as it relates to the specific job of court reporting. SB 671 attempts to remedy this situation by requiring all certified shorthand reporters to obtain continuing education as it relates to the specific job of court reporting, and therefore ensuring that the shorthand reporter is gaining or maintaining the education necessary to stay up to date on the current rules, regulations, and statutes that affect the way shorthand reporting is practiced. The bill will be implemented by the Court Reporters Board through the Department of Consumer Affairs and requires the board to establish on or before July 1, 2012, minimum approved continuation requirements for certificate renewal, and to establish a procedure for approving providers of continuing education courses. It's my understanding the board can implement the provisions of 671 without additional funding or increased staffing. I'm not aware of any opposition, and I ask for your aye vote today. We have Tony and Ed with the Deposition Reporters Association. And
my name's Yvonne.
And Yvonne.
Thank you. And just at this hour, brevity is a wonderful thing.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman and members. Ed Howard, representing the Deposition Reporters Association. Very briefly, with the Judicial Council requiring official court reporters in 2007 to take continuing education, the only licensees who operate in the legal profession without continuing education benefiting consumers now are the freelance deposition reporters. With that, I'll turn it over to Tony Pallone, who is as the Legislative Director for the Deposition Reporters Association.
Good evening. My name is Tony Pallone. I'm here on behalf of the Deposition Reporters Association of California. We are the only trade association in the nation specifically devoted to the needs of the freelance licensees that are addressed in this bill. I myself have been a licensee for over 33 years, and I've owned a deposition firm in San Jose for over 29 years. And as an agency owner, I sort of have a dual role of being not only a licensee, but sort of a consumer of licensees' services. And so I've been able to see on a firsthand basis the need for continuing ongoing education by freelance reporters, how critical that is. As the analysis that you have on the bill mentions, my official colleagues who are directly employed by the court and who work directly for judges in the courtroom have, since 2007, at the direction of the Judicial Council, been required to take 8 hours of continuing education every 2 years. And the case for continuing education in my segment of the profession is equally compelling and equally needed. There are, for example, unique ethical issues that we have to face as freelance deposition professionals who must try and both solicit business from law firms while at the same time maintaining our strict neutrality and impartiality between those attorneys that we work for and their adversaries on the other side of cases. And millions of dollars can be at stake when litigation can get very personal and contentious and bitter. Also, the technology in our profession has changed drastically. In the years that I've been working, when we first started, we used to dictate our steno notes onto tape, and then it was transcribed by transcriptionists. Then we went to computer-aided transcription. Then we began to offer a computer-aided transcription with hookups to attorneys and judges so they could see the instant translation of our steno notes immediately before them, which dramatically speeded up the process for everyone involved. Now we can deliver transcripts online. We have online transcripts repositories. We can take our real-time translation feed and send it out over the internet so participants across the nation can play a part in a deposition without having to attend in person. All of that technology requires additional ongoing education that may not be received at the time of your basic training as a court reporter. What we do also is not only take dictation, but have to be at least marginally familiar with a good number of technologies and sciences. We have to be able to master the jargon of neurosurgery one day and mechanical engineering the next day and geology the day after that and aeronautics the day after that. All of this requires ongoing and critical education. And we also have to be constantly upgraded on the new updates to all legal changes and ethical changes that court reporters must be critically aware of. What we do is very important in the legal process. One wrong word could mean the difference between punitive damages and none being awarded, the difference between the life and death of a small business or of a reputation or of even a life. That is why it's necessary that we be licensed, because what we do is really very difficult and very important, and continuing education has to be a part of that. Every other licensee in the legal profession must undergo continuing education to ensure their ongoing competence and to protect the consumers of our services. It is equally important for deposition reporters to do the same. As a small example, some years ago, the Court Reporters Board instituted a new regulation to protect the consumers that required minimum transcript formats. That meant that every consumer of our services could be assured that there would be a certain number of lines on a page of the transcripts we produce and a certain number of words. There were, unfortunately, many licensees who were unaware of that law and were not observing it. If we had minimum CE requirements in place now, I'm absolutely certain that every one of our licensees would know that. For all these reasons, I ask for your aye vote in the vote. Thank you.
My name's Yvonne Fenner. I'm the Executive Officer of the Court Reporters Board, and I'm here just for questions from the committee.
Sure. I know Mr. Cassie will be very brief. Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, members, Jim Cassie with the California Court Reporters Association. We're a co-sponsor of the bill and support it very much. Continuing ed is important. If they had it for lobbyists, I'd probably be a poster child for it.
Thank you very much. Questions by the committee? Yes.
Mr. Chair, this is a very, very important bill, and I think the testimony we've just heard helps us all understand that very thoroughly. Thank you very much, and I'll make a motion on the bill. No opposition as far as I can tell.
Any additional questions? Please call the roll.
Price.
Aye.
Price, aye. Emerson.
Aye.
Emerson, aye. Corbett. Corbett, aye. Correa.
Aye.
Correa, aye. Hernandez. Hernandez, aye. Negretti McLeod. Negretti McLeod, aye. Vargas. Vargas, aye. Walters. Walters, no. Wyland. Wyland, aye. 8-1.
That's another story.
All right, Senator Price. Items 13 and 14 have been pulled off the calendar today.
That's correct.
So the last bill up today is Senate Concurrent Resolution 33 on foreign investment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And again, just trying to add another tool in the California job development toolbox. SCR 33 finds and declares that it's in California's economic interest to promote opportunities for EB-5 visa investment in the state. Congress created the EB-5 visa program in 1990 to attract foreign investment, making the EB-5 status available to immigrants seeking to enter the U.S. in order to invest in a business or company that will benefit the economy. To be eligible for an EB-5 visa, an applicant must invest $1 million in a project that will benefit the U.S. economy and create full-time employment for at least 10 qualified individuals. If the investment in a new commercial enterprise is made in a rural area or one of high unemployment, that investment can be $500,000. The economic downturn has led to higher unemployment in California and has limited access to credit and investment opportunities for California businesses. Many foreign investors see California as a desirable place to invest and reside. Greater foreign investment in California would create jobs and improve the state's economy. The federal government's quota of 10,000 EB-5 visas every year has been rarely met, indicating that the program may be underutilized, an underutilized source for foreign investment. Use of the EB-5 immigrant visa has increased during the economic downturn, and other states have implemented aggressive and successful programs to attract foreign investment. It's California's interest to promote opportunities for EB-5 investment in the state, and I urge an aye vote on this measure to help stimulate the California economy.
Witnesses in support? Witnesses in opposition? Questions by the committee?
I'd like to
Senator
move the bill, Mr. Chair.
You've moved the bill. Any questions by the committee? All right. Call a roll.
Price.
Aye.
Price, aye. Emerson. Corbett. Corbett, aye. Correa. Hernandez. Hernandez, aye. Negretti McLeod. Did you say? Negretti McLeod, aye. Vargas. Vargas, aye. Walters. Wyland. 5-0. That passes out 5-0.
Okay, it's out 5-0. We will lift the calls on item number one.
Emerson. No. Emerson, no. Hernandez. No. Hernandez, no. Negretti McLeod. No. Negretti McLeod, no. Wyland. No. Wyland, no. Fails 1-8.
Okay, the bill fails 1-8.
You told me to give him reconsideration.
Yeah, we'll reconsider.
Item number 4.
Item number 4.
SB 431. Current vote is 6-0. Yeah, we did. Yeah.
Let's put over.
Corbett. Aye. Corbett, aye. Correa.
Aye.
Correa, aye. Hernandez. Hernandez, aye. That passes out 9-0.
That bill is out 9-0.
Yes. Item number 5, SB 619, due pass to appropriations. Current vote is 7-0. Corbett. Aye. Corbett, aye. Hernandez. Aye. Hernandez, aye. That passes out 9-0.
That passes out 9-0.
And we have item number 7, SB 675, due pass to appropriations. Current vote is 2-2. Emerson. Correa. Hernandez. Negretti McLeod. Vargas.
Senator Wright asked that I ask for reconsideration on that for next week. He's going to make some changes, so I'd request reconsideration.
Call it again. Okay. Emerson. Correa.
No.
Correa, no. Hernandez. Negretti McLeod. Vargas. So that's 2-3.
Private, no secondary.
Yeah, that's reconsideration.
Wright's been.
Reconsideration.
Yeah. Item number 8, SB 692. Current vote is 5-0, due pass to appropriations. Corbett? Item number 8, SB 692, Walters. Professional engineers. Corbett, Correa, Hernandez, Vargas. So it passes 5-0.
The bill is out 5-0.
Item number 9, SB 744 by Wyland. Oh, I'm sorry, that's already passed out, 9-0. I remember.
Pass it again. Pass it again.
10 is Item number 11. Item number 11, SB 817.